Devontre was 36 years old, made a steady $94,000 a year as a substation operations engineer for Duke Energy, and on a Saturday night at precisely 9:02 p.m., the life he thought he had was officially declared dead. It wasn't a sudden death. It was the result of a long, wasting illness he had been forced to watch in silence for 6 agonizing weeks. The declaration came from his wife, Solana, who stood in the center of their living room, a space defined by cool gray walls and a $6,000 sectional sofa he'd made the final payment on just last month. She held a glass of Chardonnay, a $45 bottle she'd opened for herself, the condensation beating on its surface. Her deep brown skin, usually a source of warmth and comfort for him, seemed to absorb the cold, recessed lighting, making her look like a stranger. She wore a new dress, a silk slip of a thing that probably cost more than his monthly car payment on his 2018 Toyota Camry. She hadn't told him where she got it. He hadn't asked. He already knew these conversations led nowhere. "We need to talk about some new rules," she said, her voice devoid of the affection that had once been the soundtrack of his life. It was now clipped, businesslike, as if she were a manager addressing an underperforming employee. Devontre sat in his usual armchair, a worn but comfortable $800 lazy boy he'd bought a decade ago, a relic from his bachelor days. He'd been watching a documentary about the Roman aqueducts, marveling at the ancient engineering. He muted the television. The sudden silence in the room was immense, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of traffic on Briar Creek Parkway. "New rules?" he asked, his own voice sounding foreign to him, a low rumble against the sharp edge of hers. Solana took a slow, deliberate sip of her wine. She swirled the liquid, watching it coat the sides of the expensive crystal glass. "I'm not happy, Devontre. This whole thing, this us, it's not working for me anymore. It feels restrictive, old-fashioned." He waited. He had learned to wait. In his job, patience was a virtue and a safety requirement. You didn't rush a diagnosis on a transformer bank humming with 230,000 volts, and he was learning you didn't rush a confrontation with a woman who was methodically dismantling your marriage. She finally met his eyes, and there was no warmth there, only a chilling resolve. "So from now on, things are going to be different. I'm going to live my life. I'll wear what I want." She gestured down at the shimmering dress. "I'll text who I want." Her perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her $1,200 iPhone. "And I'll see whoever I want. Those are the new rules." The words hung in the air, each one a perfectly formed, perfectly cruel little dart. "I'll wear, text, and see whoever I want." It wasn't a discussion. It was a decree. She was declaring herself a free agent while still expecting to enjoy the comforts of the home he paid for, the security his steady job provided. She expected him to sit in his comfortable old chair and just accept it. That was the most insulting part, the sheer, unadulterated arrogance of her assumption. She saw him as a fixture, as reliable and unexciting as the electrical grid he maintained. A utility. Something you only notice when it stops working. He had no idea how right she was. He was about to stop working for her permanently. What Solana didn't know was that this devastating moment was not a surprise. It was a detonation he had been waiting for, a timer he had been watching count down for 42 excruciating days. He felt a strange, cold calm settle over him, the same focus that descended when a feeder line tripped and thousands of homes went dark. The problem was identified. The protocol was clear. It was time to execute the plan. The outrage didn't start with the new rules. It had been accumulating for months, a slow drip poison into the heart of their 8-year marriage. It began subtly, with a change in her spending. Solana had always appreciated nice things, but in the last year, it had escalated into a kind of fever. She'd quit her job as a paralegal 2 years ago, saying the stress was too much. He'd supported it, wanting her to be happy. He thought she might find a hobby, volunteer, maybe even start the small event planning business she'd always talked about. Instead, her days became a carousel of consumption. There was the white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car she'd insisted they needed because her old Honda felt unsafe. He'd co-signed the loan, the $715 monthly payment, a significant bite out of his budget. Then came the clothes. Not just nice outfits for a special occasion, but a constant stream of packages from Net-a-Porter and Saks. A $2,400 Burberry trench coat for a Raleigh spring. A pair of $900 Jimmy Choo heels for a charity gala she decided not to attend at the last minute. He'd tried to talk to her about it one Tuesday evening in April, about 4 months before her grand declaration. He'd spread the credit card statements out on their $3,000 acacia wood dining table. The numbers were stark. "Solana, we spent over $5,000 on clothes and restaurants last month," he said, keeping his voice even. "We can't sustain this?" She barely glanced up from her phone, her thumb swiping through Instagram. "Don't be so dramatic, Devontre. It's just money. You make good money." "I make good money for an engineer, not for a celebrity," he countered gently. This is a lot. That $1,200 brunch at the Umstead you went to with your friends last Sunday? That's more than my monthly food budget for the both of us." She finally looked at him. Her eyes narrowed. "My friends' husbands don't nickel and dime them. Marcus just bought Tiffany a new Range Rover, just because." "I'm not Marcus. We're not them," he said, feeling the familiar frustration build. "This isn't about nickels and dimes. This is about our future. We're supposed to be saving." "Saving for what?" she scoffed, a sound that was becoming increasingly familiar. "A boring retirement in some dusty suburb. I want to live now, Devontre. I'm not going to apologize for having taste." She stood up, grabbing her $2,800 Celine handbag from the back of a chair. "I'm going out. The sound of all this paperwork is giving me a headache." That was the first time he felt a true chill. It wasn't just carelessness. It was contempt. Contempt for his work, for his prudence, for the very foundation that gave her the freedom to be so reckless. He was the power grid, and she was just flipping switches, assuming the lights would always stay on. The cruelty became more personal. He'd come home from a grueling 12-hour shift at the Briar Creek substation, covered in sweat and the metallic tang of ozone, his hands stained with grease. He'd find her on the couch, pristine, scrolling through her phone. "Ugh, can you please shower before you sit down?" she'd say, wrinkling her nose without looking at him. "You smell like a factory." He used to laugh it off. He'd make a joke about being a blue-collar man for his white-collar wife. But the joke wore thin, and then it wasn't a joke at all. It was just an insult. The hands that she found so disgusting were the same hands that had fixed the leaky faucet under the sink, assembled every piece of IKEA furniture in their guest room, and worked countless overtime hours to pay for the very couch she was lounging on. One evening in May, he came home excited. "I got the promotion," he announced, holding a letter from his supervisor. "Lead operations engineer. It's another $8,000 a year." Solana glanced at the letter. "Only 8? For all those extra hours you work?" She shrugged. "Well, I guess it's something. That new Louis Vuitton I saw is 7. She wasn't joking. She turned back to the TV, where a reality show about wealthy housewives was playing. The message was clear. His achievement was measured only by its capacity to fund her next acquisition. It wasn't a shared victory. It was just a slight increase in her allowance. The phone was the worst part. It was a constant companion, a third person in their marriage. It was always in her hand, angled away from him. It would buzz at all hours, and she would snatch it up with a secretive smile. If he walked into the room while she was texting, she would quickly lock the screen and place it face down. "Who are you always talking to?" he asked one night, the question slipping out before he could stop it. "Just my friends," she'd say, her tone defensive. "God, can't I have a private conversation?" The facade of their happy life was cracking under the strain. They had a beautiful home in a desirable Raleigh neighborhood, filled with expensive things. To an outsider, they were the picture of success. A handsome, hard-working black man and his beautiful, stylish wife. But inside those walls, the air was thick with resentment and secrets. He remembered the early days, when they lived in a tiny apartment near NC State. They didn't have much, just his junior engineer's salary and her paralegal income. They'd cook dinner together, listening to old soul music, and talk for hours about their dreams. He'd had a 1999 Honda Accord with 200,000 miles on it, and she'd had a beat-up Nissan Sentra. They dreamed of owning a home, of building a life. Now they had the home. A $550,000 new construction with more space than they needed. But they were further apart than ever. He would sit in his chair, and she would sit on her sofa, the 10 feet of expensive rug between them feeling like a canyon. He felt a profound sense of loss for the woman he had married, the woman who used to praise the calluses on his hands and call them his maker's marks. That woman was gone, replaced by this cold, dismissive stranger who measured his worth in dollars and found him wanting. The outrage was a low hum in his chest, the constant vibration of a transformer under immense, unsustainable load. He knew something had to give. He just had no idea how spectacularly it would break. What do you do when the person you love starts treating you like an obstacle to their happiness? Let me know in the comments what you think Devontre should have done at this point. The discovery happened on a Tuesday, 6 weeks before Solana's ultimatum. It was 10:17 p.m. Devontre was in his home office, a small room he'd set up with a sturdy second-hand desk and his work laptop. He was preparing for a system-wide software update, downloading protocols and reviewing schematics. Solana was out, as she often was on Tuesday nights. "Yoga," she'd said, grabbing her keys. "It goes late." His personal laptop, a 5-year-old MacBook Pro, was on the fritz. The screen was flickering, and he needed to back up his files. He remembered that Solana had recently upgraded their iCloud storage plan to the 2-terabyte family option for $9.99 a month. "For all my photos," she'd explained. He'd never bothered to join the family sharing plan she'd set up, but it seemed like the easiest way to transfer his files to the cloud. He logged into his Apple account and accepted the family sharing invitation she had sent weeks ago. As soon as he did, his desktop populated with shared folders, photos, calendars, and a little green icon he rarely used, messages. He didn't think anything of it. He started the backup process, and while he waited, idly clicked on the Messages app to see if it had synced his own text from his phone. It had, but it had synced more than that. Because of a quirk in the way Apple's family sharing and iMessage sync worked, when he joined the group, his laptop didn't just pull his messages. For a brief window, until the permissions fully updated, it pulled everything being synced to the shared cloud, including the messages from the account that had set up the sharing. Solana's. At first, he was just confused. There were threads of conversations he didn't recognize with names he'd never heard. A group chat called Girls' Night that was far more explicit than he would have imagined. But then he saw a name he did recognize. Marcus, the husband of Solana's friend Tiffany. The one who bought the Range Rover just because. His heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. It felt like the moment before a circuit breaker trips, that infinitesimal pause where everything hangs in the balance. His hand trembled as he clicked on the thread, and there it was. 6 months of a secret life laid out in blue and gray bubbles. Marcus, still thinking about Saturday. That dress was... wow. Solana, oh, this old thing? You should see the one I just bought with the money he gave me for groceries. Marcus, you're a bad girl, Solana. Solana, you have no idea. He scrolled up, his breath catching in his throat. The yoga nights, the brunches with friends, the charity galas. They were all there, a meticulously constructed web of lies. Marcus, my treat next week. Let's go to the Umstead. Get the tasting menu? Whatever you want? Solana. He'd have a heart attack if he saw the bill. He's so obsessed with saving. It's boring, Marcus. Some men know how to provide, others just know how to work. Don't worry, I'll take care of you. The words were a physical blow. Some men know how to provide, others just know how to work. The contempt he had felt from her in person was magnified 1,000 times in text. To this man, she painted him as a plodding, unimaginative drone, a walking ATM who was too boring to understand her needs. He kept scrolling, a sick, morbid curiosity compelling him forward. He saw the dates of her trips, the pictures she sent him of the expensive meals, the new clothes. She was using Devontrae's hard-earned money to fund a lifestyle designed to impress another man. The $5,000 credit card bill wasn't just recklessness. It was a betrayal so profound he could barely process it. The Burberry coat, the Jimmy Choo heels, they weren't for her. They were costumes for the role she was playing in her other life. The worst was yet to come. Solana, I'm so tired of him. He came home smelling like metal and sweat again. I can't stand him touching me. Marcus, you deserve a man who smells like Tom Ford, not a power plant. Solana, I'm working on my exit strategy. Just need to get a few more things in place. He's so predictable he won't see it coming. He won't see it coming? Devontrae pushed his chair back from the desk so violently it slammed into the wall, leaving a small dent in the drywall. He felt a wave of nausea so intense he had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from falling. The room felt like it was tilting, the schematics on his other monitor blurring into an incomprehensible mess. He could feel the low-frequency hum of the house around him, the same hum he'd lived with for years, but it now sounded menacing, alien. He looked at his own reflection in the dark screen of the laptop. He saw a man in a simple gray t-shirt and jeans. He saw the fatigue in his eyes, the lines around his mouth from years of quiet responsibility. He saw the man she described, the boring, predictable man who smelled like work. And for the first time in his life, he was glad of it. Because a predictable man can also be a methodical one. A man who understands systems, who knows that every action has a reaction, and who can plan for a catastrophic failure. Her mistake wasn't the affair. Her mistake wasn't the lies or the theft. Her mistake was thinking he was stupid. Her mistake was underestimating the quiet, methodical man who kept the lights on. In that moment, standing in his small office at 10:47 p.m., the love he had for Solana didn't just die. It evaporated. It was replaced by something cold, hard, and clear as glass. It was the feeling of a problem being identified, a threat to the system. And just like at work, he knew exactly what to do. Isolate the fault, protect the assets, and then cut the power. He took a screenshot of every single conversation, then another and another. He saved them to a new encrypted folder on an external hard drive. The backup had finished. He now had a backup of his own. The 6 weeks that followed were the longest and most difficult of Devontrae's life. He had to move through his own home like a ghost, a spy in the life that was supposed to be his. Every day was a performance. Every conversation was a test of his resolve. This was the playing dumb phase, and it required an actor's skill and a sapper's nerve. The first morning after the discovery was the hardest. He woke up at his usual 5:30 a.m. The sky outside was a dark, pre-dawn purple. Solana was still asleep, her face peaceful, a stark contrast to the ugliness he had read on his laptop screen. He saw her not as his wife, but as a hostile agent in his midst. He had to fight the urge to wake her up, to throw the printed-out text on the bed and watch her world crumble. But that wasn't the plan. Rage was a wildfire. It burned hot and fast, but ultimately consumed itself. What he needed was a controlled demolition, precise, clean, and devastating. So he got out of bed, his feet making no sound on the hardwood floor. He went downstairs, started the coffee, and packed his lunch for work. A turkey sandwich on whole wheat, an apple, and a bottle of water. The same lunch he packed every day. The normalcy of the routine was both a comfort and a torture. Solana came down around 8 a.m., wrapped in a $400 silk robe he'd bought her for their anniversary. "Morning," she mumbled, heading straight for the coffee machine. "Morning," he said, his voice even. He was sitting at the kitchen island, reading the news on his phone. He could feel her presence, her proximity, and it made the hair on his arms stand up. "I need to run some errands today," she said, pouring coffee into a mug that said, "Boss Babe. Could you transfer some money to my account? I need to get my nails done and pick up a few things." He looked at her. He knew from the texts that errands was code for meeting Marcus for lunch at a new, expensive restaurant downtown. He knew the money he was about to give her would pay for a meal she would enjoy while complaining about him. The old Devontre would have questioned it, started a small argument about the budget. The new Devontre simply nodded. "Sure, how much?" "500 should cover it," she said, not even blinking. He took out his phone, opened the banking app, and transferred the $500 from their joint checking, funded 95% by his salary, to her personal account. He watched the number leave his balance. It felt like paying a toll. "Done," he said. "Thanks, babe," she said, giving him a quick, dry peck on the cheek. It felt like being brushed by a snake. He didn't flinch. He just watched her walk away, his expression unchanging. That was the first lie, the first scene in his new temporary reality. He was funding his own humiliation, and he had to pretend it was an act of love. Each time he did it, a small part of him died, but a larger part, the methodical engineer, cataloged the transaction as another piece of evidence. The scenes repeated, each one a small cut. There was the Friday night she came home late, smelling of wine, and a men's cologne he recognized from a sample she'd made him try once, Tom Ford. "The girls and I went out for drinks, and it just got so late. You know how we get when we're gossiping," she said with a laugh, stumbling slightly as she took off her heels. He just helped her to the couch and got her a glass of water, his face a mask of calm concern. Inside, he was a block of ice. He knew she had been with Marcus. He had read the text, planning the drink. "Marcus, wear that red dress. The one that drives me crazy." "Solana, only if you promise to misbehave." She had worn the red dress. He had seen it in the laundry hamper the next morning, a faint trace of that expensive cologne still clinging to the fabric. He didn't say a word. He just put it in the wash with the rest of the clothes. He played the part of the devoted, slightly boring husband to perfection. He mowed the lawn every Saturday. He took the trash out on Wednesday nights. He listened to her vague, sanitized stories about her day, nodding and asking just enough questions to seem interested. "Tiffany is having such a hard time with her contractor," she'd say, recounting a story she'd likely concocted on the drive home. "You're so good at that stuff. Maybe you could give him a call." Just have him send me the plans, he would say, knowing full well there was no contractor, no plans. It was all a smokescreen. The hardest part was the physical intimacy, or the lack thereof. When he would come to bed, she would pretend to be asleep. If he brushed against her, she would flinch and pull away. The woman who once couldn't fall asleep unless his arm was around her now treated his touch like a contamination. He'd read her text to Marcus, "I can't stand him touching me." So he stopped trying. He would lie perfectly still on his side of their $4,000 king-sized bed, a chasm of cool sheets between them, and listen to her breathe. He would stare into the darkness and plan. He became a creature of the night. After she was asleep, he would slip out of bed and go to his office. The small room became his command center. The door was always locked. He'd spend hours poring over their finances, printing bank statements, credit card bills, and the loan agreement for her BMW. He highlighted every extravagant purchase, every large cash withdrawal, every restaurant bill that didn't make sense. He created a timeline, cross-referencing the financial data with the dates and times on the text messages he had saved. The evidence was overwhelming, a mountain of deceit built one transaction at a time. The $500 for nails was on a statement next to a restaurant charge for $487.50 at Second Empire. It was a clear, damning picture, and he was the only one looking at it. The loneliness of that knowledge was a heavy weight, but his resolve was heavier. He was no longer just a husband. He was an auditor of his own life, and the books were a mess. While Solana was living her new life on his dime, Devontre began quietly building his own. His strategic planning phase was conducted with the same precision and foresight he used to manage the electrical grid for half of Wake County. It was a covert operation, executed in the margins of his life, in the hours when she thought he was either working or sleeping. His first move was a phone call. The day after his discovery, during his lunch break, he sat in his Camry in the parking lot of the substation and searched for the best family law attorneys in Raleigh. He disregarded the flashy ones with television ads and focused on the ones with quiet, formidable reputations. He found a man named Arthur Vance, a partner at a well-respected downtown firm. Vance's bio said he specialized in complex asset division and had a reputation for being thorough and unshakable. His hourly rate was listed at $450. Devontre didn't hesitate. He scheduled a consultation for the following Thursday, using a personal day he had saved up. The law office was on Fayetteville Street, in a glass tower that reflected the old brick buildings across the way. It felt a world away from the humming transformers and high-voltage lines of his daily life. Devontre wore his one good suit, a simple charcoal gray one that cost $400, and carried a slim leather briefcase he'd bought for the occasion. Inside was the encrypted hard drive. Arthur Vance was a tall, elegant black man in his late 50s, with graying temples and eyes that missed nothing. His office was lined with law books and had a commanding view of the city. He listened without interruption as Devontre, in a calm, flat voice, laid out the entire story, from the escalating spending to the iCloud discovery. He didn't editorialize or show emotion. He just presented the facts. When Devontre finished, Vance leaned back in his $3,000 ergonomic chair. "Mr. Williams," he said, his voice a smooth baritone, "this is remarkably well documented. Most clients come to me with suspicion and tears. You've come with a case file." "I'm an engineer, Mr. Vance," Devontre replied. "I believe in data." He plugged the hard drive into Vance's computer, and for the next hour, they went through the evidence. The texts, the bank statements, the timeline. Vance's expression grew more and more grim. "She's been committing marital waste on an industrial scale," Vance said, pointing to a highlighted Amex statement showing 5 separate charges at a single luxury boutique totaling over $6,000. And this affair, in North Carolina, marital misconduct can have a significant impact on alimony. She's not just been unfaithful, she's been financially reckless with marital assets to fund that infidelity. This changes the entire calculus of your divorce. Vance laid out a clear, step-by-step plan. First, Devon Trey needed to protect his own non-marital assets. The most significant of these was a small, two-bedroom bungalow in East Raleigh he had bought before he even met Solana. He'd inherited a little money when his grandmother passed and had used it as a down payment. The house was modest, about 900 square feet, but the lot was large and filled with mature oak trees. He'd been renting it out to a young couple for years, earning a small but steady stream of passive income. Your premarital property is yours, full stop, Vance explained, but we need to make sure she can't touch it. We also need to protect your Duke Energy pension. That's your future. The following Saturday, while Solana was at a spa day that cost him $800, Devontre drove to the East Raleigh bungalow. The tenants had moved out 2 months prior, and he'd been meaning to get it ready for the market. Now it was going to be his lifeboat. The house was on a quiet street, lined with similar post-war homes. It had a small front porch and a yard that was a little overgrown. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was stale, but the house was solid. The hardwood floors his grandfather had taught him to refinish gleamed in the afternoon light. He walked through the empty rooms, his footsteps echoing. This was different from the Briar Creek house, which felt like a showroom Solana had decorated. This felt real. It felt like him. It was a $180,000 asset fully paid off, and it was his salvation. He spent the next 4 weekends at the bungalow. He told Solana he was helping his brother Ruben with a project at his new condo. In reality, he was preparing his new life. He aired the place out. He patched the small dent in the living room wall. He mowed the lawn and trimmed the hedges. He had the electricity and water turned back on in his name. The house was quiet, peaceful. In the evenings, he would sit on the porch with a bottle of water and listen to the cicadas, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Back at the Briar Creek house, the covert operation continued. Following Vance's advice, he opened a new bank account at a different bank, in his name only. He redirected his paycheck to this new account. He let just enough money flow into the joint account to cover the mortgage and basic utilities, but not enough for Solana's extravagant whims. The final piece of his plan was the duffel bag. It was a simple, black canvas bag he kept in the back of his closet, hidden behind old winter coats. Inside, he methodically packed the essentials: a week's worth of work clothes, 3 sets of casual clothes, his DOP kit, the encrypted hard drive with all the evidence, his personal documents, birth certificate, passport, the deed to the bungalow, a copy of his contract with Arthur Vance, a few sentimental items, his father's old watch, a faded photo of his mother, and his engineering degree from NC State. It was a go bag, a life raft. The physical manifestation of his decision, every time he saw it tucked away in the darkness, it was a reminder. The timer was still ticking, but soon it would hit 0. The marriage Devontre knew had been built on a foundation of shared moments, small acts of service that, woven together, created a life. Before the betrayal, their home was a place of comfortable routines, each one a quiet affirmation of their partnership. He remembered Saturday mornings. He was always the first one up, the smell of the coffee he brewed filling their spacious kitchen. He'd make pancakes from scratch, his mother's recipe, and have a plate waiting for Solana when she finally came downstairs. She used to say his pancakes were the only reason she got out of bed before noon on a weekend. The ingredients were simple, costing no more than $5, but the value she placed on them seemed immeasurable. He recalled the day they closed on the Briar Creek house. It was a brand new $550,000 shell with white walls and no personality. Solana had a vision. She'd spent weeks creating mood boards, tearing pages from magazines. He was the one who made the vision a reality. He spent a month of evenings and weekends painting the rooms in the specific shades of gray and blue she had chosen. He assembled the flat-pack furniture from West Elm and Crate and Barrel, his engineering mind finding a strange satisfaction in deciphering the often confusing instructions. The $6,000 sectional sofa arrived in 3 massive boxes. He'd been the one to haul them inside and put it all together. He had even installed the recessed lighting himself, a project that took 2 full weekends and multiple trips to Home Depot, saving them over $3,000 on an electrician. At the time, he saw it as building their nest, a tangible expression of his love. He was providing just in a different way than Marcus, with his casual Range Rovers. He was providing with his time, his skill, his sweat. And Solana had seemed to appreciate it. "Oh, Devontre, it's perfect," she'd exclaimed when he finally finished installing the dimmers in the living room. "You can fix anything." She had kissed him then, a real kiss, full of gratitude and affection. His hands were covered in drywall dust, and he probably smelled like sawdust. But she didn't seem to mind. She'd held his hands and traced the calluses with her thumb. "My strong man," she had whispered. Where had that woman gone? He thought about it as he sat in his Lazy Boy, the documentary now forgotten, listening to her lay down her new rules. He looked around the room he had largely built and paid for. The paint on the walls, the sofa she was perched on, the very light she was standing under, it was all a product of his labor. And she was using it as a stage to announce his obsolescence. There were other scenes, too, from the time before the contempt. He remembered a time when she was proud of his job. He'd taken her to a family day at the substation. He had explained to her in simple terms the complex process of stepping down voltage from the transmission lines to the distribution network. He showed her the massive transformers, the intricate web of switches and breakers. Most people's eyes would have glazed over. But she had listened intently. She asked smart questions. "So this one machine," she had said, pointing at a giant capacitor bank, "is basically making sure thousands of people can turn on their coffee makers at the same time without everything exploding?" He'd laughed. "Basically, yes. It's all about managing the load." "My husband," she had said to one of his colleagues later, her arm linked through his. "He manages the load. He keeps the lights on for everyone." The pride in her voice was unmistakable. It had made him feel 10 feet tall. Now she made him feel small for doing the exact same work. The smell of ozone she once found intriguing was now the stench of a factory. This contrast was the cruelest cut of all. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair or the money. It was the complete rewriting of their shared history. It was her taking all the good things, all the moments of connection and partnership, and twisting them into something ugly and transactional. She was erasing the man who made pancakes and installed light fixtures, replacing him with a caricature of a boring, clueless provider, a utility, a means to an end. The dollar tag details of their life together flashed through his mind. The $3,000 dining table where he'd tried to have a serious conversation about their finances. The $1,200 iPhone she used to coordinate her secret life. The $43,000 car he was paying for that she used to drive to another man's arms. Each object was a monument to his misplaced trust. Each price tag was a measure of his foolishness. He had been a good husband. He worked hard. He was faithful. He was kind. He had given her everything he had, including the power to destroy him. And she was using it without a second thought. The facade of domestic normalcy had been so convincing, so detailed, that he had mistaken it for the real thing. But it was just a stage set, and now the play was over. The strike began not with a bang, but with a profound silence. Solana finished her declaration. "I'll wear, text, and see whoever I want. Those are the new rules," and stood there, a smug, challenging look on her face. She expected an argument. She expected yelling, pleading, a dramatic scene. She had her script ready, full of lines about her needs, her suffocation, her right to be happy. She was braced for a fight she was certain she would win. Devontre gave her nothing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask questions. He didn't beg for an explanation. He simply looked at her, his face a calm, unreadable mask. The silence stretched, 1 second, 5, 10. It was no longer the comfortable silence of a shared space, but the dead, empty silence of a vacuum. He could see the confusion starting to flicker in her eyes. This wasn't going according to her plan. "Well?" she finally snapped, her bravado faltering. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Devontre took a slow breath. He thought of the bungalow in East Raleigh, waiting for him. He thought of the duffel bag in the closet. He thought of Arthur Vance's calm, reassuring voice. He thought of the mountain of evidence on the encrypted hard drive. And he felt a strange, liberating sense of peace. He was no longer managing a marriage. He was executing a planned shutdown. He pushed himself up from his $800 lazy boy. His movements were slow, deliberate, with no trace of anger or agitation. He placed the remote control for the television neatly on the side table. "Where are you going?" she demanded, her voice rising. He still didn't answer her. He simply turned and walked out of the living room, his footsteps steady on the polished hardwood floors he had installed himself. He walked up the carpeted stairs, the ones he had vacuumed just yesterday. Each step was a step away from the lie their life had become. He could hear her following him. "Devontre! Don't you walk away from me when I'm talking to you. We are having a conversation." He reached the top of the stairs and walked into their master bedroom. The room was dominated by the $4,000 king-sized bed where he had spent 6 weeks lying awake, staring at the ceiling. He walked past it and went directly to his closet. Solana appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed, her face a mixture of fury and disbelief. "What are you doing? Are you seriously giving me the silent treatment? How childish." He ignored her. He reached into the back of the closet, behind the winter coats, and pulled out the black canvas duffel bag. It felt solid and reassuring in his hand. He placed it on the bed and unzipped it. Her tone shifted from anger to a mocking amusement. "Oh my God, are you serious? You're going to pack a bag? Like in a movie? Where are you going to go? To your brother's? Don't be so dramatic, Devontre. You'll be back in an hour." He didn't look at her. He walked over to his dresser and opened the top drawer. He methodically took out his socks and underwear and placed them in the bag. He went to the closet and took down his work uniforms, neatly folded. He added his DOP kit from the master bathroom, making sure to grab his toothbrush and his $15 bottle of Cetaphil face wash. The banality of the items was a stark contrast to the drama Solana was trying to create. This wasn't a dramatic gesture. This was logistics. "I said, I'll wear, text, and see whoever I want," she said, her voice getting louder, trying to regain control of the scene. "That doesn't mean we're over. It just means we're updating the terms of our arrangement." Our arrangement? The words echoed what he'd read in her texts. She saw their marriage not as a partnership, but as a contract whose terms she could unilaterally amend. He zipped the duffel bag shut. It was 9:42 p.m. The entire process had taken less than 5 minutes. He picked up the bag, his laptop case, and his keys from the nightstand. He finally turned and looked at her. For the first time since he'd stood up, he met her eyes. "You're not really leaving," she said. But for the first time, a note of uncertainty, of real fear, crept into her voice. She was finally realizing this wasn't part of her script. He wasn't playing his assigned role. He walked toward the bedroom door. She stood in the way, blocking his path. "Devontre, this is ridiculous. Stop it." He didn't try to push past her. He just stood there, holding the bag, waiting. The still, duffel-on-shoulder composure was his only response. He was a mountain. He was an immovable object. He was the calm center of the storm she had created. Finally, realizing he would not engage, she stepped aside, a look of pure shock on her face. He walked past her without a word, down the stairs and toward the front door. "You can't just leave!" she shrieked from the top of the stairs. "The mortgage is due! My car payment! You can't just walk out on your responsibilities!" He paused at the front door, his hand on the doorknob. He thought about all the things he could say. He could tell her he knew about Marcus. He could tell her he had the texts. He could tell her she was a liar and a thief. He could list every dollar she had wasted, every cruel word she had uttered. But he didn't. Silence was a far more powerful weapon. His actions were his statement. He opened the door, stepped out into the cool night air, and closed it gently behind him. The click of the lock was the most satisfying sound he had ever heard. It was 9:47 p.m. He walked to his 2018 Toyota Camry, a car that was entirely his, fully paid off. He got in, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb without a single look back at the $550,000 house and the woman standing in the window, her face a perfect portrait of disbelief. He was free. The consequences began to cascade almost immediately, a chain reaction he had set in motion with the quiet click of the front door. Devontre drove the 20 minutes from his old life in Briar Creek to his brother Ruben's condo in Apex. He felt nothing but a vast, quiet relief. The constant, low-grade hum of anxiety that had been his companion for 6 weeks was gone. He arrived at Ruben's place just after 10:15 p.m. Ruben, a lanky software developer with kind eyes and a head full of neat locks, opened the door. He took one look at Devontre standing there with the duffel bag and simply said, "It's time?" "It's time," Devontre confirmed. Ruben had been the only person Devontre had confided in, sworn to secrecy. He pulled his brother into a firm hug. "The guest room is ready for you. Come on in." As Devontre stepped inside, his phone, which had been silent on the drive over, began to explode. He pulled it out. 14 missed calls from Solana. And the texts were starting. 9:52 p.m. "Where are you going?" 9:55 p.m. "Devontre, I'm serious. Pick up the phone." 10:01 p.m. "This is not funny. You think you can just walk out?" 10:08 p.m. "You left your damn lazy boy. Are you coming back for it? This is so stupid." Devontre showed the screen to Ruben, who just shook his head. "Turn it off, man, for tonight. Just turn it off." Devontre powered his phone down. The silence was a blessing. The next morning, a Sunday, was the start of Solana's new reality. The first domino fell at 11:30 a.m. She was, according to the text she sent to his now-off phone, on her way to brunch with the girls. She tried to pay for a full tank of premium gas for her white BMW 3 Series at a BP station. The joint credit card, the one with the $20,000 limit, was declined. She tried it again. Declined. She tried the joint debit card. Declined. Insufficient funds. This was a direct result of a call Devontre had made to the bank's 24-hour fraud line at 6 a.m. that morning from Ruben's couch. "I believe my card has been compromised," he had told the agent. which was, in a way, entirely true. He reported the cards lost and requested new ones be sent to a P.O. box he had set up. He had already transferred the majority of the funds from the joint account to his new personal account the day before, leaving just enough to prevent an overdraft from the mortgage payment that was scheduled to auto-draft the next day. Her frantic voicemails started coming to the Google Voice number he had set up for this purpose, a number routed directly to an email address that Arthur Vance's office also had access to. Voicemail 1, 11:38 a.m. Devon Trey, call me right now. The cards aren't working. I'm stuck at a gas station and it's humiliating. What did you do? Tone: angry, confused. Voicemail 2, 1:15 p.m. Okay, I'm home. I had to have Tiffany pay for my gas. Do you know how embarrassing that is? I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to fix this. The mortgage is due tomorrow. Tone: demanding, justifying. The next domino fell on Monday morning at 9:05 a.m. An email arrived in Solana's inbox. It was from Arthur Vance. The subject line was stark: Devon Trey Williams versus Solana Williams. Notice of legal action. The attached PDF was a formal notice of separation and the initial divorce filing. It also contained a motion to freeze all marital assets pending discovery and a temporary restraining order preventing her from liquidating any accounts or property. It explicitly mentioned marital misconduct and significant marital waste as grounds. Voicemail 3, 9:12 a.m. Sound of ragged breathing, then a choked sob. A lawyer? You got a lawyer? Marital waste? What the hell is that? You can't do this, Devon Trey. You can't. Tone: horror, dawning realization. On Wednesday, the third domino fell. A tow truck, dispatched by the financing arm of BMW, arrived at the Briar Creek house. The $43,000 car was co-signed, but Devon Trey was the primary name on the loan. As part of his plan, he had stopped the automatic payment. The car was being voluntarily repossessed, as per an arrangement he'd made. Solana was recorded on a neighbor's Ring camera, screaming at the tow truck driver as he hooked up her prized possession. Voicemail 4, 2:45 p.m., screaming, hysterical. They're taking my car. They're taking my goddamn car. You did this. You are trying to ruin my life. I will sue you for everything you have. Tone: pure rage. The consequences kept coming, each one a direct result of her own actions, now being reflected back at her. Her phone was on the family plan, in his name. Service was disconnected on Friday. The utilities, also in his name, were scheduled for disconnection at the end of the month. The subscriptions she lived on, Netflix, Spotify, her $150 a month FabFitFun box, were all canceled. The biggest blow came 2 weeks later. She had assumed she would be entitled to half of everything. What she didn't know, and what Arthur Vance laid out in a brutal legal letter, was that North Carolina law is not so simple. With the evidence of her affair and the meticulously documented financial waste, over $70,000 in non-essential personal spending in the last year alone, her claim to alimony was nullified. Furthermore, Devon Trey would be seeking to have that $70,000 deducted from her share of the marital home's equity. She lost the car. She lost her access to his money. She lost her social standing. As the news of the messy divorce, fueled by her own dramatic public displays, spread through her circle of friends, Tiffany and the others, whose husbands just provided, slowly distanced themselves from the woman who was suddenly without a provider. Marcus, the man who smelled of Tom Ford, stopped answering her calls the moment he heard the word lawyer. His own marriage and assets were at risk. He was a predator, not a savior. Solana's downfall was not a single event, but an unraveling. It was the slow, methodical disconnection of every utility she had taken for granted, both literal and metaphorical. Devontre had not acted out of revenge. He had simply acted. He had removed himself from the equation, and the entire unstable structure she had built around him collapsed. He had just kept the lights on, and when he walked away, she was finally left in the dark. Have you ever had to make a tough decision to protect your own peace? Share your story in the comments below. We can all learn from each other's strength. A year later, the world was a different place. The late afternoon sun of a North Carolina autumn streamed through the windows of the small bungalow in East Raleigh. It was no longer a lifeboat, it was home. The scent of lemon polish and old wood hung in the air. The overgrown yard was now a tidy garden, with rows of collard greens and tomatoes growing strong in the dark soil. Devontre had found a new rhythm, a quiet, steady beat that resonated with the man he was. Not the man he had been pretending to be. He kept the house. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. Arthur Vance had been as good as his word. The evidence was irrefutable. The judge had looked at the highlighted bank statements, the texts, the timeline, and his decision had been swift. Solana's claims of alimony were dismissed. The marital waste was calculated, and her share of the equity from the sale of the Briar Creek house was reduced by nearly $80,000. She walked away with a check that was a fraction of what she expected, enough for a security deposit on a small apartment and not much else. The house itself sold in 2 weeks in the hot Raleigh market. Devontre never saw the inside of it again. He kept his pension, a fortress around his future. His Duke Energy pension was secure, untouched. It represented decades of steady work, of showing up, of managing the load. It was his, and it would remain his. His life was simpler now, and infinitely richer. He sold his reliable Camry and bought a used Ford F-150, a 2019 model with 50,000 miles on it, for $28,000 in cash from his share of the house sale. He needed it for hauling mulch and lumber for his garden and the endless small projects around the bungalow. He found joy in the work of his own 2 hands, the same hands Solana had found so distasteful. He rebuilt the small back deck, refinished the floors in the guest room, and painted the exterior a handsome, calming shade of slate blue. At work, he thrived. Freed from the constant stress and financial drain of his marriage, he poured his energy into his job. He took the lead on a major grid modernization project, earning the respect of his colleagues and a significant bonus, which he invested wisely. But the real fulfillment came from mentoring the new apprentices, young men and women just starting out. He saw himself in their eagerness, in their hunger to learn. He would take them out into the field and explain not just the how, but the why of their work. It's not just about switches and wires, he told a young engineer named Jamal one sweltering afternoon as they looked over a newly installed transformer. It's about responsibility. It's about community. People are counting on us to be steady, to be reliable. When the storm comes, we're the ones who go toward it. That's the job. His evenings were his own. Some nights he would sit on his new deck, a glass of sweet tea in his hand, and listen to the sounds of the neighborhood. Other nights he'd meet Reuben and his family for dinner. He found a quiet joy in the simple domesticity of his brother's life, a warmth that had been absent from his own for so long. He took long, quiet walks in Pullen Park, watching the families and the students, feeling a part of the city in a way he never had in the sterile suburbs of Briar Creek. He wasn't lonely. He was peaceful. He had learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. He had been lonely in his marriage, a stranger in his own home. Now he was alone, and he was content. One Saturday morning, he was at a local nursery, picking out some fall mums. A woman's voice called his name. He turned. It was Solana. He almost didn't recognize her. The expensive clothes were gone. replaced by simple jeans and a t-shirt. The elaborate hair was now a simple, low ponytail. The defiant, arrogant spark in her eyes was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. "Devontre," she said, her voice quiet. "Hi." "Solana," he replied, his tone polite, neutral. "Your garden looks nice," she said, gesturing vaguely in the direction of his neighborhood. I live a few blocks from here now, in the apartments on Pool Road." "I see," he said. An awkward silence fell between them. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry," she finally choked out, the words seeming to cause her physical pain. "For everything. I was a fool. I didn't know what I had." He looked at her, the woman who had caused him so much pain, and he felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, not love, just a quiet finality. The circuit was broken. The power was off. There was nothing left to connect them. "I wish you well, Solana," he said, and it was the truth. He picked up his flat of mums, which cost $24.99, and walked toward the checkout counter, not looking back. Her apology was for her, not for him. His peace had already been found in the soil of his garden, in the hum of a well-maintained substation, in the quiet, steady rhythm of a life he had built for himself. True wealth isn't measured by the price of your car or the label on your dress. It's not about what you have, but about what you can't lose in a fire. It's integrity, it's purpose, it's peace of mind. Devontre had been a rich man all along. It just took losing everything he thought he wanted to realize it. What does it mean to be truly wealthy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for joining us on Love Beyond Pride, where we believe that the greatest love story is the one you write with your own life.